Hey everyone, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and today I want to talk about the tech industry and how they are attempting to secure the US election. Now, you may know that we have a multifaceted problem here in the United States with our upcoming election, and consider the following that I have talked about, written about, podcasted about, just everything about, especially if you're following me, you probably know a good chunk of this. The U.S. Senate has passed no bills whatsoever pertaining to election security and strengthening it despite basically knowing of cyber threats and having voting machines that 11-year-olds can basically break into at hacking conferences still in use today. That's obviously a very serious problem. We've also seen an explosion in fake news and conspiracy theories, from QAnon to 5G cell towers giving you coronavirus, to various conspiracies about other coronavirus aspects, etc. These are now being tied back to our politics, and basically here we are going back and forth, interweaving conspiracy theories into the political realm. We have a growing deepfake problem. I've done videos and podcasts on that. In fact, my last video yesterday / podcast was on deepfakes and how to detect them. We also have a problem with social media sharing, like Facebook groups that are basically run by both Americans and foreign threat actors, as been proven multiple times since 2015 or so, to basically spread disinformation. We also have a lack of education basically for the general population on critical thinking and how to spot things like fake news, which obviously would help to counteract confirmation bias that almost everybody has at this point, as we are living in a polarized issue. So by virtue of polarized nation on virtually every issue. So by virtue of this, we're a mess. And the primary drivers of this proliferation that are basically going to hinder or hurt our ability to secure our election properly, and honestly, it's free social media. It's these platforms that are letting this grow and thrive. So what are we doing to combat this? And for that, we're going to actually turn to a New York Times article that literally came out yesterday entitled "Google, Facebook, and Others Brought in Group to Secure U.S. Election." Now, here's what's going on. According to basically these various platforms, as well as the New York Times, Facebook, Google, and other major tech companies said yesterday that they added new partners and have recently met with government agencies in an effort to help secure the November election. Now, the group, which is seeking to prevent basically the kind of online malfeasance and foreign interference that we had with the 2016 election, basically previously consisted of the large social media firms like Twitter and Microsoft, not to mention Facebook and Google, but they've added new participants to this, which includes the Wikimedia Foundation, which runs Wikipedia, LinkedIn, Pinterest, Reddit, and Verizon Media, which apparently has their own online platform, I guess. Now, the group met yesterday with representatives from agencies like the FBI, the Office for Director of National Intelligence, and the Department of Homeland Security in an attempt to share insights about disinformation campaigns and emerging deceptive behavior across basically their platforms. The government participants also included the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, which is under DHS, that's the CISA, and the Department of Justice's National Security Division. And so basically, to quote a spokesperson for this group, "In preparation for the upcoming election, we regularly meet to discuss trends with U.S. government agencies tasked with protecting the integrity of the election. For the past several years, we have worked closely to counter information operations across our platform." Now, the effort has basically broadened as the November election approaches, and the tech companies and agencies have actually started to meet and coordinate more frequently. At yesterday's meeting, basically this group with the agencies updated one another on the behavior that they are seeing, not to mention things like illicit activities, that Facebook and Google, etc., are now seeing on their platforms. And basically, to once again quote that spokesperson, "We discussed preparations for the upcoming conventions and scenario planning related to election results. We will continue to stay vigilant on these issues and meet regularly ahead of the November election." Now, several social media companies have reported, obviously, an increase in disinformation efforts as the election approaches. I've actually done videos and podcasts on this. Last month, Twitter removed thousands of accounts that promoted the QAnon conspiracy theory. And this week, multiple news outlets reported that millions of QAnon conspiracy theories adherents were basically hidden in private groups and pages throughout Facebook. NBC News was the one that broke that. And so some background on this group before I get to my thoughts here, just so you understand what this group of online tech companies is doing. This group basically emerged from meetings that began between tech companies and government agencies last fall. So this official group, while they've been, let's say, independently working with law enforcement or at the federal level for years, this group came together last fall. Now, these companies have since taken action to try to ward off threats, basically in elections around the world. So Facebook, for example, has monitored election behavior in countries like Mexico, Brazil, Germany, and France. Last year, Facebook said it was strengthening how it verified groups and people that placed political advertising on its site. I've actually run into this because, full disclosure, I've occasionally run ads for articles I've published or stuff like that on Facebook. And we're talking like, $5-10 here or something like that. But they reject a good chunk if I mention something that, let's say, falls or possibly falls in the umbrella of politics. But, and this is a huge but, the efficacy of the coalition basically is unclear. So this group will continue to discuss active threats, but it is still the responsibility of each company to actually mitigate election interference on its platform. So here are my thoughts on this, because I think this is a good step, but hear me out here, because I applaud the effort of these platforms to try and get a hold of this situation, even though I know they're basically going to be accused of censorship. Basically, they're going to be hit with cries of censorship, bias, all that kind of stuff. So, for example, it was recently reported that Facebook, for example, actually internally in Facebook has a bias towards politically conservative posts in the past, and that is due to Facebook's fear of being labeled as a censor or as biased by the more vocal groups on that side of the political aisle. And that, I think, is what a lot of these organizations and these platforms are going to face. But I also think this shows a lack of leadership at the top level of government. Both houses of Congress and the executive branch of the U.S. government appear to essentially have abdicated their responsibilities for election security by not passing enhanced security bills. They're not making this a public issue, and even in some cases, they appear to undermine the veracity of the election by debating items, and we're talking about mail-in ballots during the pandemic and all that kind of stuff. Now, I will say this, I do my best to stay out of politics here. I believe that my job in cybersecurity, cyber warfare, etc., is agnostic to any political leaning or belief, but we cannot just ignore cybersecurity by virtue of that. And this is basically falling in the realm of cybersecurity, and I have seen inaction of 2 out of the 3 branches of government, and I don't really include the Supreme Court because they need a case in front of them to actually adjudicate something. We need to firm up our election just like any country on the planet who cares about having a fair and secure election. At this point, being like 80 odd days, maybe even in the late 70s, high 70s worth of days to the election, we now have to rely on these individual massive platforms, many of whom just data mine us and violate our privacy on a regular basis. I know if you've been watching me and following me or listening to me, you know I've gone after Google and Facebook and governments all over the world, including China and the United States. But we now have to basically defend them. They are defending themselves, and now we are basically beholden to whatever defense they put up there, and they are defending us from this onslaught of insanity of conspiracy theories, state-sponsored actors, and all of this that I mentioned at the very beginning of this video/podcast. There is no position, here that is good. We are not in a position in this society, basically as a large, complex, and rather wealthy society as the United States. We can't be where we are right now, and that's a very serious issue. And so I laid it all out here. I'd love to hear your thoughts here. I am not pointing the finger at any side of the aisle or anybody on the political spectrum. Feel free to argue that amongst yourselves. I'm simply saying these are the facts on the ground. As we debate these things, as we continue to look at all of the ways that others are trying to undermine our election in any way, shape, or form, whether it's domestic or foreign, we have a serious problem here that we need to discuss. And if we are leaving our election security up to the Facebooks and Googles of the world, something has seriously gone wrong. And I think we need to discuss that. But I also think that we need to hold the leadership in our country, as well as any country that you're in that has this same problem, accountable. And again, I'd love to hear your thoughts, because that is your news of the day. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe and stay online. Thanks, everyone.